Blueprint for Change. A plan to overcome challenges. Blueprint for Change. A guide to help create opportunities. Blueprint for Change. Thought-provoking conversations. Blueprint for Change. Why wait when you can contribute to the Blueprint for Change?
Good evening and welcome to Blueprint for Change, the show designed to change your perspective on how you think about national issues facing the Bahamas. We want to help you discover your blueprint for change. I am your host, Michael Diggiss, along with, I don't know, I keep saying host extraordinaire or, host extraordinaire, the one and only Dale Happy Knowles. Dale,
hi,
welcome.
Good evening, Mike and the Bahamas, and to our guest, and we'll introduce him in a second. Thank you, Mike, once again. Blessings to the one above for allowing us to have this opportunity to do some good things in this side of the world and with some bright minds on the show tonight. So,
Not to put pressure on the guests, right?
No.
Well, thank you for having me.
Yes. So tonight, we're going to continue our discussion on the mindset in the new built environment. And we have with us, his formal name would be, I think it would be Doctor, correct? No?
No.
Okay,
no.
Darcy.
Not yet, yes.
I thought he might have had a academic doctorates too, but anyway. Darcy Rahming Jr., who we will be discussing the topic of the Youts Dem in the digital world and what that brings in this day and age. So Darcy Jr. is a millennial entrepreneur. He's graduate from the Northwestern University of McCormick School of Engineering with a bachelor's degree in electrical engineering. I did that, but I don't know if I'm at a STEAM school like him. He specialized in robotics, yes. Control systems design. I started with that, but I quickly went to something else as in digital. But he's also a businessman, and he's teamed up with his father in the management consulting company of $M Limited, if I pronounce that correctly, CTO of that, helping business owners become more fill the gaps on their capital undercapitalization and not being able to be successful because of that. And also our equity crowdfunding platform where he's the technical guru there. So a little man with a big impact. Darcy, welcome to Blueprint for Change.
Thank you for having me.
So,
yeah. Go ahead, Happy. I just was listening to you, read off his bio, and pretty impressive.
Yes, good man. I think his father went to school with me, so that tell you some things, right? So he took all of the gravy, and I got left out. I wasn't able to grab up all the crumbs on the table. I graduated. Thank you, Lottie. So Dr. Mary Bethune said, we have a powerful potential in the youth, and we must have the courage to change old ideas and practices so that we may direct their power towards good ends. As I mentioned before, your dad and I went to school together, and so I'm sure you have the power, he had the courage, and together we're going to get to good ends. So we're going to look forward to this harvest that you're going to share with us tonight.
I'm happy to be on the show, and thankful for the opportunity to tell a little bit of my story.
Great, awesome. So we normally do in the show 3 tiers. One is laying the foundation. The other one is creating the environment for success. And then the third part would be drawing the blueprint for change. So in laying the foundation, we know today that 70% of the electorate is under 55. That's what the numbers are trending towards. 60% of those are on 40. And so we also know that over time, youth from when I was in school were ostracized to a certain degree, not having a meaningful participation in over the 3 generations, the 30 years of the 3 generations, Generation X, Y, and now Z. And so we look forward to being able to find ways to help empower the youth so we could really, as a nation, become as successful as we ought to, what our capacity will allow us to be. And so if I can ask, the first question is what is the reset generation, as I call them, that's Generation Y and Z, mindset on the rightful place for that generation?
Well, I would say, first of all, that by no means am I a unique individual in the society. I'm just one of many kids that was fortunate enough to be sent off to school, to get really well educated, and to decide to come back home. There are many of us here, and I'm sure both of you esteemed gentlemen and the listeners at home know of people that are fit in that category. So in that context, the youth and how do we feel about coming back home and being in the Bahamas with that environment that you just described. Well, like my take on it is that, you know, the Gen Z and the millennials are kind of, we're at the most productive time of our life. You know, I just turned 30. So in my 20s, I spent most of it kind of learning new skills, learning new things, working 100-hour work weeks, working really hard on different projects, learning things, failing, trying again, doing all of those things so I could be a better business person. And now that I'm reaching my 30s, I feel like I have a lot of value to add to the organization that I'm with. And getting back to what you said in relation to your generation, my father's generation, I view you guys as teachers, as people that have gone before, have stepped on some of the landmines, can tell me those stories so I don't step on those landmines. You know, and I think it's important that we find a way to work together as the different generations, because everybody has something to add. You know, if it would be ridiculous to ask my father and you guys to work 150-hour work weeks, whereas for us we could do that in a heartbeat. You know, so we all have something to add to making this place better, and that's what I want to say about it.
Yeah,
I hope. Sorry, I just want to throw this in there. I hope it is not implying, Dale, that you and I are the old folks, and even to consider working 150-hour weeks, even though we do work that. Surprisingly, I'll let you know that.
What I meant by that was, like, I'm functional. At this point in my life, I'm supposed to be a functional person in an organization, whereas my father and I'm the youngest person in the company, by the way, and all of the people that fortunate enough to be surrounded by, many of them are in strategic roles. Right. You know, so it's a different kind of value being added. For example, if you know, like I said, I'm 30. If I wanted to get a meeting with someone, it would be very difficult. Sometimes I get their secretary, they'd say, no, I don't want to see you. Whereas when he calls, he gets a meeting immediately. Those are the ways that we're working together. It's
called paying your dues.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. And I will say that we as a generation, my generation and the one a little bit younger, are willing to pay those dues. So we just want to be allowed to.
Yes, and that's a key item there, because as you mentioned, the youth generally is always considered to be the energetic, creative ones, and the those who are mature. I won't say old or elderly. Those who are considered to have the wisdom of, like you say, already bucking your toe and mashing your finger and all that kind of stuff, and know how to guide that energy to get maximum performance, right? And so there needs to be collaboration. For example, myself and Mike are collaborating on this show, particularly, and other ventures that we could dabble our fingers into. And so once we have that mindset, then we will have maximum success. But in today's world, we don't seem to want to break this colonial mindset that whoever is the person in charge has absolute authority and it's supposed to be their way and nobody else's way, and they're not really interested in thinking. How do the millennials and the digital natives view that?
Well, I can't speak for everyone, but I can speak for myself when it comes to that. I personally don't think that we as a country will ever be on the same page when it comes to many issues. That's part of democracy. Democracy seems like just, it's designed for us to argue amongst each other and hopefully get to a better country through that process. Where I do see collaboration happening is through companies and organizations with a common goal stated up front, where people can then through like things like shareholder agreements and legal structures, really negotiate the relationship between the different parties. So for example, as you were talking about yourself and Mr. Diggiss, I'm sure you guys have formal relationship and you've over time have negotiated that you're working together because you have a common goal. It would be very difficult to then throw 20 other people into that relationship and try and get consensus on anything. In fact, I would say it's almost impossible from the founder point of view. So that's what I mean. I think it's possible, just not in the wider society, but certainly within companies and organizations.
Interesting. Right. But let me just throw this at you, though, Darcy. In your world, in the tech world, information builds on itself, right?
Yes.
And information sharing happens, but you seem to, and that's why I'm curious about your thought process, because in the information and digital space, I would like to believe that information sharing and information building is a natural process, and that one person could start and another person could add on and others could keep adding on, and that collective adding on is where the greatest value occurs.
Okay, so I'll give you an example. There's a website called Reddit. Are you familiar with Reddit? It's these feeds where these pages, these channels where a common topic is placed and then people contribute. Right. And you contribute based on your desire to contribute to that particular topic. So in that sense, everybody there has a common interest. And so what technology has just done is that it's allowed way more people to find each other with that common interest and then participate. So that's an example of how it's done digitally, but it really is, they like to say the more things change, the more they stay the same. It really is just an old concept expanded.
Right.
It's a common group moving towards a common thing. So how would you expand
that to business?
So in business, you can do it through, what's fascinating is the way that it's done in Silicon Valley, because Silicon Valley is also tech center, tech business. And what they do is they do it through making sure that the business has a big enough dream so that multiple people can participate in that dream or that that goal. And then they use, of course, the legal system and all the other system, all the tools that are available to business people to make sure that everyone's marching step going in that direction. So like I say, I personally think it's business that gives a more of a, I would say, an easier way for a group to find consensus rather than like the open society.
Yeah, so that you might know or might not know that I worked for telecoms for many moons. And creating the digital environment was one of the things that was in my portfolio. And so one of the things that digital was intended to do for us is to create a more efficient environment and to be able to cause reach and networking quicker, faster, and the like. And so with the millennials and the digital invaders, the native Spain, that's just sea, for lack of a better term. That's fish in the sea scenario. That's a natural for you compared to the aged ones who might be scared of it still today, even though we are now moving into actually almost to the third phase of digital, even though we missed the second one. And also the fourth revolution of the technology and industrial technology. So we need to catch up as a country. And even in your age groups and the like, there's a lot of interaction with the digital for consumerism, but it isn't being embraced from enterprise point of view as it probably should be. So what do you think should be some of the things that needs to happen to move that barrier?
Well, I think because I'm as the chief technology officer, I'm responsible for digitizing and making sure that that is done in our firm. So I think it's it has to do with communication, and people have to, especially in companies dealing with that intergenerational. There's a lot of well, let me just start by saying, once you are on the same side, once you know that, you're there to solve a problem together, then the arguing about how to solve that problem is easier because it's within that context. It's not I don't like you, you don't like me kind of argument. It's a, how are we going to solve this problem? And so then the younger person can come in and say, no, this is a better way of doing this. This is going to make all of our lives easier. This is going to do that. But if you don't have that starting place, it just looks like, oh, this guy is trying to take my job, or he's trying to show me up. And it's I think without that common understanding, that's where a lot of organizations kind of fall down. And then, of course, if you end up punishing the guy who's bringing the ideas and the technology, they leave, they go somewhere else, or they leave the country sometimes. And so it's about finding laying that foundation, as this segment is about, so that you can then jump into the problem properly structured. Because no one, everybody wants to contribute. And if you're dealing with someone and they say that their expertise is social media, and you don't know, and the other partners don't know anything about social media, you kind of have to lean in that. Like, for example, we're in financial technology. I'm not a compliance person, so I lean on the compliance person's expertise. But that can only be done if you trust them and you're working towards a common goal. That can't be done under any other circumstances.
Oh, sorry, Dave. Let me ask this. Go back to the common goal question, because Dale asked the question about setting the foundation. So how do we ensure that there's common purpose, a common goal? Because I think that's fundamental to where we seem to struggle as a people and as a country. I don't think we have consensus on what is the common ground. How do we begin to move towards developing a mindset that identifies that we have to have a common purpose and a common goal first?
Okay.
Because
So,
I'm sure there are many ways we could solve a problem, but if we don't have a common goal established, isn't that going to become the greatest impediment?
it does become the greatest impediment, and it happens through, like I say, I'm going to use the example of what's happening in Silicon Valley. So what happens when startups are formed is startups are a collection of people looking to do something, a common goal. How they manage their relationships is through shareholding, ownership in something, because then it becomes almost I'm going to use this analogy, but it becomes almost like a marriage where you are there with this guy, you got this common goal, and you're working towards things. Of course, you're going to have friction, but that binding of you guys together legally under this company kind of keeps that together. Even though obviously your partner has the flaws, you have your flaws, and you're working together to still manage to do this, even with all of that, because it really is about managing that friction that naturally happens. Because, like I say, I mean, it can get really heated, especially when you start talking about what direction you want to take the company in, and how you're going to do it, how much money you're going to spend. People's fears, you have to be like really, really open and transparent, and you can only be that vulnerable if you have legal protection on your side. You know what I'm saying? Like, nobody's going to expose themselves to their boss in a normal company. I mean, because he could kill you. So it's you understand what I'm saying? It's about creating that space where you can do that kind of work.
I want to push a little bit more on this, though,
Okay.
Darcy, because I think this is fundamental, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you picked the marriage analogy. So if you don't quickly determine if you want to get married at all, because some people get married and they don't really want to be married.
Yeah.
Right? How do you spend the time working on making sure that there is a common goal and a common purpose? What are some of the things you need to begin to do as a mindset that says, here are some things we ought to kind of discuss or kind of peel back and say, okay, fundamentally, do we actually have common agreement and common purpose?
Okay, so it comes down to, like I say, being honest at all portions of this and talking about what your dreams and goals are. So if one partner is, say, in his 60s, his goals might be to set the company up and then cash out within 5 years. And that's okay. He wants to go,
Right.
Relax, play with his grandkids, do whatever with his life. He needs to come in from the very beginning and have that expectation, versus the 20-year-old might be saying, I want to build the next great Bahamian company. I want to put 40 years into this business. He too needs to be honest. And so everybody has to kind of be honest about what they want. And so then once you know what you truly want out of this thing, then you can say, okay, this is what I want, this is what you want, this is what you want. How do we manage to get to this goal in those timeframes so we can all get what we want? And that's why that small team is very important. And like I say, I mean, if you hear the stories of the really famous entrepreneurs like Steve Jobs was a very difficult person to work with. And when I say very, very difficult, I mean incredibly difficult. He was so difficult they had to kick him out as the CEO of Apple the first time.
Yes.
Because he was, just imagine this 30-year-old egomaniac who happened to make great computers, but I mean, he was really difficult. So that's what I mean. You have to manage those things. But also, speaking about them kicking out Steve Jobs, his rights were protected. He didn't just get kicked to the curb. He got kicked to he had to leave the company, but he was still the largest shareholder of the company because he had built all that value in the company.
Right.
So it's not the company structure doesn't protect you from doing whatever you feel like, but it does protect the value that you put into the company, and that's an important distinction.
Yes, and so before Mike takes us to the break, I just wanted to say this point. So being one of the architects of digital in the Bahamas, I know the power of digital, and I know the power of the millennials and the digitals knowing it inside out. And so for me being at a higher level in terms of age-wise, I know what some of the challenges are that you all face in a job scenario. And by the way, we're in the middles here, right? Because I'm in the Gen X's, and so there's the baby boomers and the rest of them above us who have another mindset altogether. But when we look at the power that you all possess as, I call it the sharks in the sea, because that's your territory, that's your domain. What do you say to your fellow millennials and digitals to help them be able to empower themselves in their work environment? Now, you work with your in a very professional environment who understands what is happening, but there's a lot of environments that don't understand the power of digital and the like. And so how do you advise them or counsel them to help them be able to materialize their strengths?
I would say that, frankly, you don't know everything. You could be really, really smart. I'm a pretty smart guy, but I don't know everything. So
what's the difference, Darcy?
What's the difference? I know what I know, and I know that I don't know everything. So, for example, you know, like I say, for example, there's so much experiential knowledge that I just wouldn't have because, you know, I didn't spend the 20 years laying down lines and throughout the islands and doing that. I would have to lean on someone like you, Mr. Knowles, for the pitfalls of this project and that project and the stories. Whereas, so that's what I mean by you don't know everything. But that being said, it's really nice when you have that relationship where the person across from you also understands that they don't know everything and they're relying on you. So it's a give and take, like all good relationships. It's not just down one direction. It's back and forth with a healthy amount of tension. Let me just put it that way. It's not easy to find, but
when you don't find that environment exists, and I guess the easiest thing to do is to exit left or exit stage right, as they say. The COVID example tells us every day how the millennials and digitals pretty much react to authority that is not embracive of them, right? And so, you know, I don't know how we're going to get past or be able to bridge that gap, whether that's going to be something that is going to be materially happen or that's going to come through some traumatic event. I call it a tsunami is coming, but
yeah. I think it's I think it comes back to that starting it off right, being vulnerable. You know, we both the truth is we need each other. That's the truth. And as sooner you.
So why do you say that? Because you say these very poignant things and you kind of move on. But I think you need to stress, why do you say we need each other? Because most people, I don't think, believe that.
Well, I mean, to do anything of scale, anything, you know, even if you're really excellent, there's only so much you can do in a day. And you really have to rely on other people. And once you can understand that you have to rely on other people to get where you're going, it kind of changes the way that you interact with people. And like I say, this requires everybody to kind of be honest, everyone to kind of have that same understanding, because then you can ask really, really hard questions. I mean, you can say things like, you know what your problem is? Your problem is that you're too one-track minded. You know, something that would send a person out of the room to soul search.
Yes.
And then they got to come back and say, you know what? That was said from a position of love. He wants what's best for me. He didn't say it to hurt me. It was a hard truth. I can come back and we can get this project going back on. But you can't do that. You can't even begin to do that stuff without having that understanding, having that protections, having those things. Otherwise, you'll just hear that and you'll just run out the room, because nobody likes to be talked too hard, and business is all about getting talked too hard at a certain level.
Yeah. So before the producer takes us to the break, we have a few Facebook questions or comments on listeners. If you want to ask Darcy a question, go on the Facebook page, Blueprint for Change Show, and post your question, and we will endeavor to ask it, and hopefully you'll be kind enough to answer you.
Okay.
But the Tanya Smith Cartwright says, love to see our colleague grads returning home, set on making a contribution to our country. However, we have to make it more enticing. So they want to do too and have a reason to come home. So with that, Mike?
Yes, because Darcy, I want to talk about, this whole question about coming home, because I think we have a similar story about why do you want to come home. But we'll take our first break, Mr. Producer Ali, and we'll be right back after these brief messages.
Eleanor Roosevelt said that great minds discuss ideas, average minds discuss events, and small minds discuss people. The ultimate design starts from thought, and thought is a product of one's mindset.
Let's change our mindset from being employees to being employers, from being workers to being owners.
Why don't we tell it the opportunity instead of the job?
I think one of the things that we need to understand first for us to appropriately, I guess, get the litmus test on how we see the creatives, how we see creatives in society in general, is how we understand and value our own creativity.
What's the steps to get out of the rut?
Leaders have to lead. Leaders have to lead.
The challenge that we have is with the political the public sector, where they need to understand that the private sector should take the lead, and they should be followers and listen to the private sector and let them take the lead role in causing the kind of environment that we need to happen. And like I said, politicians tend to want to take the lead and be discussing technical issues that they have no knowledge of. And that is the main problem and the mindset that we have to change, please.
You are listening to Blueprint for Change, the show designed to change your perspective and how you think about national issues facing the Bahamas. We want to definitely help you change your perspective and mindset. So just before the break, young Darcy, I want to talk a little bit more about your comment, or the Facebook page comment about, why should you come back home, right? Because, I had a similar struggle years ago, and it took me almost 20 years to come home. So, and I was asking the same question, so how do you make space for, the young and talented and smart, as you call them, those Bahamians who've gone away to school and have studied a particular subject matter? How do we begin to make space for them in this new dispensation?
Yeah, it's not an easy. It's an easy question to ask, and it's not an easy question to answer. So I'll give my take on it. For me, I was fortunate enough that my father had made space for me to come home, and I know that's not true for everyone. Now, mind you, I wasn't able to come home to do what I went to school for, but there was space in the family business, working as a management consultant. the so that's kind of a trade-off that you kind of have to understand, is that not everything that you go to school for, you're going to immediately be able to do. Now, if you want to do it, you're going to have to build it. So that's kind of what I understood when I came home, and it was a, it's a difficult choice. America's right there. Especially when you're in the STEM fields, they're offering all kind of money to you to stay. You have all of that basically guaranteed. It's what we have to do is, I think, as a country, is to empower a space where people come home for other reasons, because I don't know if we can ever compete with America on those reasons. What we can compete with is the idea that, at home is my family, at home is the country I love, the nice weather, the nice things, and so I will make that choice to come home if there is space for me to start a business, to grow, make sure I hit my professional goals, so I can grow as a person, so those are the kind of things that need to be built, and space that needs to be allowed for more people to come home. I think it's really that. And then, of course, people want things like, people want to live in a house, so those are the kind of issues that we need to start solving.
Yeah.
Just before Dale comes in, as a parent, because, Dale and I are parents, we hear a lot of parents telling their kids like you, don't bother coming home. Why are you coming home? Stay. Mm-hmm. What should you say to parents like us when they say that to their kids like you?
Well, I mean, like I say, I understand. I mean, it's very attractive, especially if you feel like you can't change any of these problems that we do have. But I will say that the problems are very fixable. When I say they're very fixable, yes, they're within our power to fix. Is it going to be easy to fix? No. This is work. It's still work. This is still a growing country, but a growing country has the benefit of once you build it, it's yours. In the United States, it's easy to get lost in the sheer massiveness of that country. You're just another person, and that's all you are. Whereas here, you have the ability to really, I think, make a difference in people's lives, because you're not just another person. You're Mr. Diggiss' son, Mr. Knowles' son, whatever. You're the engineer at BTC that was really helpful and really helped somebody's business. You know what I mean? It's much more. I think it's easier to make that difference.
Right. I think intimate is a good word to use, eh?
Yes. Yes, yeah. It is. Yes, it is.
Sorry. Go ahead, Happy.
Yeah, some moons back, I had to make that kind of decision myself also. And I came home because I saw an avenue to help build a country. You had a nation that was sending you off as a part of the square deal and come back to help. And so that we did. And if persons like ourselves who went off to school did not come back, we would not be having this conversation the way we're having this conversation right now. That is very much likely not to have happened. Those little small cell phones in people's hands might not have been in their hands. So on any imaginable technology that that BTC offers likely would not have been in their hands if we had continued with the old school way. And so on that light, Abraham Lincoln, who used to be president at one point in time, he said something to the effect that philosophy of the schoolroom in one generation would be the philosophy of government in the next.
Yes.
We have gone through, as I mentioned at the beginning, 3 generations, but in the government, we still have it dominated primarily by the baby boomers mentality or the philosophy of baby boomers. So the question I'm asking now is in terms of what do you see as the gaps and what changes needs to be put in place so that we could advance that philosophy to what is current affairs globally? Because
Well, I would first of all I would say that being in government is never easy. It's easy to to comment on these things when you're not there, and it's very difficult to make the right decisions without being in there. My grandfather and his brothers were part of the movement that got independence for the country. So I was able to hear the stories of what it's actually like to be in there. So I'm not saying it's an easy job. So let me start off with that. However, I do have a few things that I would like to see more of. I would like to, as a businessman, I would like to see more of the leaning on the expertise of industry. Their industry is not political, or at least it shouldn't be political. But there are some real ways that government can help industries' lives make it easier. As many people know, we're not the easiest country in the world to do business in. Now, I will say to this government's credit, they've recognized this and they're working towards it. But I will say that one big aspect of that is relying on industry, and you see some of that going on with the ERC, but it needs to be more continuous, not just piecemeal.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I would like to see.
Okay,
expand a little bit more on that though, Darcy, in terms of give an example from a business perspective, because a lot of us in business, both Dale and I, Happy and I have been in business for a long time. And so we've been struggling with, how do you maintain your business in an environment where it just seems that the most basic things that should happen seem to just take forever. So how do you think government could really be facilitators of business and business activity?
So I think one of the really awesome things that I think our neighbor to the north does is whenever they go on trade missions, they bring industry people with them. So, for example, if, say, we wanted to export more mahi-mahi, you would go up to a trade mission, say we wanted to export it to restaurants in Mexico, because, I don't know, that they want to do that. So when the minister for that goes to Mexico to meet with the Mexican minister, the Restaurant Association of Mexico and the Fisheries Association of the Bahamas could meet, and then that's where business is done. Business isn't done, formally across the phone. Business is done where once you meet, you're going to sit down, you're going to drink some tequila, you're going to drink some Kalik beer, you're going to talk about family, it's all relational.
Right.
And so more opportunities for those relationships and those networks to form, I think that would be really, really helpful, because it's government people are really good at getting in the room with other government people, and so it's kind of a reason for industry on both sides to gather around. It's a focal point, and I don't think we take advantage of that in the way that we should. Like I say, whenever you see, you saw it with President Trump for sure, but you'll see it with Biden, and you'll see it with any other U.S. president, that they'll be standing there at a conference and their industry people will be standing right behind them. And they're not there for show, they're there to do business.
Right.
And that's something that could be worked on.
Okay.
I've heard people say that in a number of ways, but I've never heard somebody use the term that the industry people are there with them. But I think that's spot on. because I've seen it, I've watched it happen in real life. And I'll give you an example at Betelco, that was its mandate, that it was to do development. That's what Betelco was said, not BTC, Betelco, on OLAC. And that's what we did. Whenever we went, wherever we went, we took the people who we needed to take, who would be able to come back and give proper counsel and advice to the powers to be. And so that model that you were talking about seems to be something that has been proven and can work very well. So I don't know, in terms of the gaps between where we are and where we need to be in that new built environment, if that's the ideal environment, what one thing you might say would be specific that could change, that will give us the biggest impact, or give us a huge impact right now in catapulting us forward, somewhat out of this stagnant rut of coasting or decline over the last number of years?
Well, I will say that it is a process. So it's a and like I say, it almost comes back. It almost always comes back to a relationship. The relationship between industry and government needs to be one where we're on the same team. We're on the same team. At the end of the day, when business does well, business hires people. Those people then have jobs. They spend the money in the economy. They pay their taxes. The government can run properly. When business does really well, business gets investors. Those people then take their savings. They grow their savings. People then pay taxes. So it's a we need each other. It's not a no one group of people is going to solve some of these problems that we have as a society. We have to, I think, line up our interests with each other. And I think a better country is what most people would consider a common interest of the Bahamian people.
Let's expand on that a little bit, though, Darcy. You always come up with these little nuggets, right? Which I guess that's why you're so smart, right? But I think it's important to stress certain things. Two things I think is of value. One, you talk about how relational business is, and that we need each other. So we're all part of the same system, if that is the case. But then culturally, we seem to, it's very easy to say, okay, we know each other, we're very tight-knit community, so we are naturally relational. So the question then becomes, why aren't we using that skill set or that natural gift that we have, because we know each other? Why aren't we using that as a tool to really leapfrog what we can do relationally to move this country so that we all could be the beneficiaries of what we can do?
Well, I mean, so you're getting into a hard truth now.
But you said in business, you have to deal with the hard truths, right?
You do.
Okay.
So I'm going to say something that I want people to take in a positive kind of way. I think it's because we are very relational, but we also, as a people, kind of like to we kind of like our hierarchies. Let me just put it that way. We want to be on top of this guy because I knew this guy since he was 5, and I remember him picking his nose in the class. And all I can keep in my mind is this guy is that same kid who was picking his nose in the class. And so that kind of sneaks in sometimes, or I should say a lot of times, where it shouldn't. That nose picking story is what you should take out when you're at the guy's wedding after he's made you a bunch of money on a business deal that you can get together with, and you can tell that story in good jest.
Right.
It's not supposed to be a limiting factor for that person, because ultimately, if you say that is not for him, and the whole society does that, we just end up broke. I mean, it's broken in the state that we're already in. You can't you can't, you can't use that to govern your adult life. I mean, that's like I say, it's fine to make fun of people for what they were once upon a time, but it's not fine for business, and it's not fine for keeping the lights on. And right now we have to change that aspect. Otherwise, we could be a failed state. That's where we're at, and it's a place where we don't want to be. So we have to kind of put that, in my opinion, we have to put that aside. We have to, like I said, we have to recognize that nobody's perfect. Everybody has made mistakes, and as long as those mistakes were made with good intentions, forgive them if they weren't, address them and move on, because you can't be looking to the past wondering why, wondering why the guy who picked his nose, who's now a world-class economist, and you're trying to talk to him like, he's still a 5-year-old kid picking his nose. I mean, it's ridiculous.
Yes.
So I think there's a lot of that going on. I said it diplomatically.
No, but your point is valid, because I guess for Happy and I, we would tend to say, if someone came up from over the hill and they became successful, how dare they, so you want to keep that person as if over the hill is such a negative thing. So
I'll add one more thing to that. What makes America really great is America leaves space for the guy over the hill. When he has that meteoric rise, he carries the whole society with him.
Yep.
So why do you want to keep him down? The only thing he's going to do is, like I say, he's going to put more money into his church community. He's going to hire a bunch of people. He's going to, send his kids off to school, and they're going to do well. I mean, there's so many benefits for helping people rise up. I personally don't see why people do that, but I've been told that I'm a unique person in that regard, or at least there are not many of us.
Yeah, we're all sort of unique in ways. Mm-hmm. So there's this mindset of the circle, on the sense that if somebody has 60% control of that circle and the like, they don't want to relinquish that 60%. Whereas, as I said last week, that if we grow based on the model that you just said and able to grow that circle to have a diameter twice as big, then, and even if that person who had the 60% only now has 30 or 40%, that 30 or 40% could be a bigger number than what it was yielding at the 60% of the smaller circle.
Absolutely.
So when we look at our definition of the new built environment, we focus on there in terms of, besides it being intentional thought and action, but we want to create the greatest opportunities to build the highest quality of life for our citizens and residents, etc., and to make it sustainable. So I'm now anointing you the czar.
Oh my God.
To be able to create the environment that we want and draw out the blueprint that is needed. And so the question is, what is the blueprint for an innovative digital tsunami?
What is the blueprint? So I believe that it is through doing all of those things that we talked about, creating the right environment, laying the right foundation, and then just trusting that other people will, as long as their intentions are good and everything is properly structured, that people are smart enough to figure it out. I mean, it's not, business can be very complicated, but in many ways it's very simple. You just have to trust that you did all of the checks, you did all of the people are trained right, and you just got to trust that they're going to do things and it'll work out fine in the end. I mean, sometimes it fails, but most times it doesn't really. Especially when people are properly nurtured.
Trust,
so it's,
Darcy, trust, you bring that word in, right? But, it's easy to say, as you quite rightly know. Trust is an easy thing to say, but it seems to be very hard to do. Why do you think that is?
Well, I think it's because we ask people to trust in unstructured ways. So, for example, you trust your airplane pilot to sit at a plane cockpit to fly this, 30,000 pound fuel-filled, basically it's like it's a moving bomb
Right.
through the air with you.
That's an interesting analogy. Yes.
You sitting in it, because he went to school for a pilot. There's a regulatory body that makes sure. So this is where government comes in. Make sure that this guy said who he is and he is who he is. That the mechanics are there and they made sure that the plane is working. If you trust that, because it's structured, you wouldn't just trust, somebody who jumped off of a boat. Yesterday he was doing tours in the tourism industry to do that, right? That would be ridiculous. On the flip side, you also wouldn't trust that guy to be a tour operator, because he would probably be the most boring tour operator in the world. So it's about that structure. I'm just using that to say that everybody has where they can add value. Not to belittle the tour operator. Right. There are a lot of tour operators making way more money than all of us. Yeah. Getting back to trust. Trust is it's about structure. So you can trust people with business once they're put in the right structure, and you can trust people with your money, your lives, business, your retirement savings, once it's put in the right context. Everything has to be put in the right context.
Yeah, so. I think that is so true, very poignant, because we seem not to have these structural relationships. That's where we could reference, by the way, here are the ground rules. This is what we've agreed. This is what we expect. And hold each other accountable.
Yes, and the truth is, most people rise to the occasion.
Yes.
Like 99% of people rise to the occasion, because the kind of person that goes and says, I want to be a pilot, says, I want to be a pilot, which means he is willing to do the work. He's willing to be put in that structure. He's willing to pay his dues. So why not trust that guy? Right. I mean, so I think getting back to the over the hill example, don't create the barriers. The country is growing. The country needs people to fulfill all of these different roles. Don't put all of these barriers up for no reason. I mean, you shouldn't have to be from the right family, super well educated, really smart, really lucky, and rich to make it in the society. I mean, there's no society can be successful if you have all of those barriers there. You have to work on making it easier for people to play the game.
Right.
Yeah. And so on that light of making it easier for people to play the game, then one of the things based on what you've said tonight is for those millennials and digital's out there to make themselves be seen as trustworthy, so that people can actually trust them to do what it is that they need to do. Even though what they're going to do is different. I always say difference is good when it's all working towards the same goal, right?
Yeah, and to bring it, just as to add to what you're saying, to bring it full circle to the beginning, really it has to be, you have to learn what the structure is. Nobody is born knowing what the structure is. And it's kind of, your people's 20s are really when their minds are, open to all of this kind of learning. And so I think that's really the millennials right now. I'm like I say, I'm 30. So I'm moving into my productive years. But when you're in your 20s is really when you have an opportunity to see this and to absorb this and decide that you want to become this. This is why everybody goes to university kind of in their 20s, because that's when they decide what they want to do and what they want to go. So I think that it comes back to needing each other. I would not be the person that I am today without the mentorship of so many businessmen that took the time to sit down with me and talk with me, took the time to tell me their stories, took the time to care,
Yep.
that maybe this little tidbit of advice is going to make sure that this kid doesn't get destroyed. And then, of course, when I did make mistakes, of course they were hard on me, but it was a position of love, not a well, oh, you got to go now. You're fired. Get out of here. You know, and so that also needs to be in there. You know, that space.
Yeah. You know, this happens all the time, Darcy. You know, I'm just looking at the time. Happy. You know, the zoning tells us we have to bring him back. Young Darcy, we have to bring him back because he's just getting into the subject matter.
Oh yeah, I could talk about business like this all day.
Oh, this is what I know. I mean, and I think we need to have more conversations about business because you're bringing a different perspective on what business truly is. You know, this relational aspect of business and the foundations that make it work.
Yes.
You know, products and services are one thing.
No, that of course your product's got to be good.
Yeah.
That's it. But you can't get to it. You'll never be able
Exactly.
to be. It won't be sustainable unless you understand the ethos of it.
And one of the key things there is, as you were talking about, most of the things I gather you to be saying is based on your experiences that you have to prepare yourself and be in a position to take advantage of that opportunity when it comes. Because if you're not prepared to listen and to do, then the energy doesn't happen.
Yeah, and by the way, I'm very fortunate. Both of my parents are executive level business people. So surrounded with this my whole life. So I got to sit down from like a little boy and ask questions.
Yeah, so you're Kobe. So
I'm not a coffee. It's
Kobe.
Oh, Kobe.
Yeah.
Yeah, like how Kobe Bryant sat around and got to hear those things. So I'm very fortunate of this, and I'm by no means like I say, I'm just a product of my environment.
Right. Yeah. So any last words you want to leave for this session to your guests?
I will end with saying that because your environment is so important, you have to surround yourself with other like-minded people that are looking to grow, are looking to do something. You cannot do this in a non-business environment. You have to surround yourself with people. You have to surround yourself with people with ideas, with experiences of all ages, of all things. Business is not something you can learn in a book. It's something that has to be done and experienced. So that's what I would say.
Awesome.
Wow. Now I see why he's smart. You know, that must be the Rahming in him, right?
I hope so.
Yes. So thank you, Darcy, for coming on this evening and sharing these nuggets with us and our Blueprint for Change audience. And we hope a lot of the millennials and the digitals out there would have gained some knowledge and inspiration to be able to go out there and do some of the things that they need to do to give them the better opportunity. And they're always welcome to hit us up on Facebook. We like to continue the conversations as they can, and willing to answer any question that there is once we be respectful in the questions that we ask.
Well, thank you for having me.
Yes, thank you. Say hi to Dad, eh?
Will do.
I'm sure he's listening, right?
Yes, he is. I'm going to talk to him afterwards.
Shout out to dads too. So as we go, we always like to say that we want our listeners to stay at home if they can, as much as possible. Don't go around people if they don't need to go around people. That doesn't mean still socialize, but socialize respectfully. Practice the social distancing, as we mentioned. Wear our masks the way we are intended to wear them, the protocols. Wash our hands and faces often, and by all means, continue to love. Love digitally. That's my kind word.
Wow, I love that.
Good evening, all, and look forward to seeing you next week.
Good night.
Good night.
Mr. Producer, thank you, Ali.
Blueprint for Change is a collaboration between Michael Diggiss and Associates and Dom Dev Enterprises Limited.